นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะ
What is Vipassana? Vipassana is the noticing and observing of the arising and passing away of psychophysical phenomena, so that we may come to know them as they really are. Every time we see, hear, touch, or know, these phenomena are constantly appearing and disappearing. It is important that we notice them and be aware of them every time they arise. But in the beginning, it will not be possible to notice all that we see, hear, touch, or know. We should therefore begin with noticing the few that we can. Every time we breathe in and out, the rising and falling of our abdomen becomes apparent. This is the element of motion called Vayo Dhatu. We should begin by noticing this. The preparation for Vipassana. The meditator who wishes to practice seriously to attain the path knowledge, Magga, Prussian knowledge, Phala, and Nirvana in this very life has to cut off the impediments, palivora, duties and concerns within the duration of practice. As elaborated at the end of session 1, morality has to be purified, the mind has to be directed wishing. May this morality support the attainment of Magga knowledge. If one has doubt about unwholesome actions related to speaking ill of noble persons, Ariyubhavada Karma, due to having criticized or wronged someone who has attained enlightenment, one should respectfully request for forgiveness from that person whom one has wronged by saying, "Please forgive me." If it is not possible to visit that person, one should respectfully request forgiveness in the presence of one's teacher. It is said in the commentaries that if one relinquishes or entrusts oneself to the Buddha, then while meditating, when fearful objects appear, there is the benefit of being free from fear. Similarly, if one entrusts oneself to the teacher will be able to admonish and correct one's mistakes without hesitation. Hence, it is good to relinquish oneself to the Buddha during the duration of the practice, and one should entrust oneself to the teacher by saying, "Please admonish me without hesitation." Even if one is unable to entrust oneself in this way, there is no doubt that one can get the distinctive knowledge in outstanding Dhamma if one follows the teacher's words respectfully and practices without backing away. The mind should be directed by considering the Nibbana where all suffering ceases, which refers to the non-arising of material and immaterial aggregates, is good and noble. The Mega Dhamma, which knows Nibbana directly and is capable of dispelling defilements, is also good and noble. That special Mega and Nibbana Dhamma can be definitely attained through the practice of Vipassana. The mind should be energized by reflecting, "I am going to strive in the work of Vipassana, the path that is always taken by the Buddha, Arhats, and noble beings." After that, one should reflect on the noble qualities of the Supreme Buddha as much as one has learnt or known into veneration. Beginning from the deities protecting the monastery, loving kindness, metta, should be radiated towards all beings. Thus, be happy, be happy. If one is evil, one should also contemplate and reflect on fullness, asubha, and death, marana, for some moments. Then, having sat down with legs crossed or in any other way of sitting, and keep the body upright, one should observe, note, and strive according to the instructions given below. It is better if one can sit comfortably without the legs pressing against one another. The primary object to start, you should attentively observe the belly with the mind. You will come to know the extension and contraction of the belly. If extension and contraction are not clear, observe by placing your hand on the belly. After a short time, if the extension and contraction become clear, then when there is movement of extension while breathing in, note as rising. When there is movement of contraction While breathing out, note as falling. When there is extension, the arising movement of the belly should be known clearly. When there is contraction, the falling movement of the belly should be known clearly. In this connection, do not be doubtful, thinking that the yogi comes to know the shape concept, santana paññati, of the abdomen too. At the beginning of the practice, it is not possible to observe by completely surmounting concept. Only when the observing and noting of the object, which is mixed with concept, is done, will it be easy for concentration, mindfulness, and insight knowledge to ripen. When knowledge becomes mature, all types of conceptual objects will disappear. The knowledge will keep reaching only to the nature of reality. Besides only the knowing and noting of material and mental phenomena arising clearly at the 6 sense doors respectively is the complete and true practice of Vipassana. But at the beginning of the practice, mindfulness and wisdom are not strong yet. Therefore, it is difficult to follow and note each one as it arises. One may tend not to be able to note. One may spend much time looking for the object which should be noted. Therefore, here the instructions are given to begin the practice by observing and noting the extension and contraction of the belly. These objects are always there, and they are obvious as well as easy to be noted and known. You will find the method of noting according to their arising later, when wisdom becomes mature. Therefore, note the extension and contraction whenever they have been, as rising, falling, concurrently and continuously. Note only with the mind. It is not necessary to recite verbally. And do not force your in-breath and out-breath so as to make the extension and contraction clearer. Do not change the in-breath and out-breath to make them slow or fast. If you change them, you will be exhausted soon and may not be able to practice. Therefore, breathe normally and do the noting concurrently. Distracting thoughts. While continuously noting the rising and falling, between them thoughts will arise every now and then. note those thoughts using the levers that are normally used. This is how to note them. You should note wandering when there is wandering. If there is pondering, note as pondering. Note thinking when there is thinking. When there is contemplation, note as contemplation. If there is analysis, note as analyzing. If the mind goes off, note as going off. If the mind arrives to some place, note as arriving. If you meet somebody in the mind, note as meeting. If you talk with somebody in the mind, note as talking. If you see somebody in the mind, note as seeing. Note repeatedly so that the seeing disappears. If you speak with somebody in the mind, note as speaking, speaking. After noting in such a manner, continue to note the rising, falling again continuously. Physical discomfort. Why noting in this way? If there is wanting to swallow saliva, note as wanting to swallow. While swallowing, note as swallowing, swallowing, swallowing. If there is wanting to spit, note as wanting to spit. While spitting, note as spitting. After that, continue to note the user object without a break as rising, falling. If there is wanting to lower the head, note as wanting to lower the head. While lowering the head, note each movement as lowering, lowering, lowering. Do not do it quickly. Lower the head slowly. If there is wanting to raise the head, note as wanting to raise. While raising the head, note each movement as raising, raising, raising. Raise it slowly. After that, continue to note the user object as rising, falling. If stiffness becomes very evident in some area, pay close attention to that very area and note normally as stiff, stiff. The noting should neither be slow nor quick and should be done part by part. It should be continuous. That stiffness might fade away slowly and disappear or become more unbearable. If one wants to adjust one's posture because one cannot bear it, note that mind as wanting to adjust. Note the physical movements and activities involved in the adjustment according to their respective names. This is how to note. If there is wanting to lift the hand or leg, note as wanting to lift. If there is lifting, note every movement as lifting, lifting, lifting. If there is stretching, note as stretching, 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 stretching. If there is bending, note as bending, 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 bending. If there is placing down, note as placing, 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 placing. Do not do so quickly, adjust slowly. If there is touching somewhere, note as touching, touching. When one has finished the adjustment or when the stiffness disappears by itself, while noting, return and note the rising and falling of the belly. If heat becomes apparent in some area, pay close attention only to that heat and note it as heat, heat. Note continuously, part by part, normally, neither slowly nor quickly. If the heat disappears while noting, continue to note the rising and falling again. If the heat becomes extreme and one wants to adjust one's posture, one should note as wanting to adjust. While adjusting, one should note the manner of the adjustment as wanting to lift, lifting, lifting. According to the method mentioned above, adjust slowly so that there will not be any lapse. After the adjustment finishes, one should note the rising and falling as usual without any break. There should not be rest or respite. If itchiness arises in some area, pay close attention only to that itchiness and note as itching, itching. Note it part by part, normally, neither slowly nor quickly. If the itchiness disappears while noting, return to note the rising and falling. If one wants to remove the itchiness because it is unbearable, note as wanting to remove or wanting to scratch. If there is wanting to lift the hand, note as wanting to lift the hand. If there is lifting, note as lifting, 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 lifting. If the itchy area is touched, note as touching, touching. When there is scratching on each pulling and pushing, note as rubbing, 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 or scratching, 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 scratching. When there is wanting to stop, note as wanting to stop. When there is wanting to put the hand down, note as wanting to put down. When there is putting down, note as putting down, putting down, putting down. If the hand touches somewhere, note as touching, touching. After that, continue to note the rising and falling without any break. If any unbearable sensation, such as pain, arises distantly in the body, pay attention to that unbearable sensation and note as pain, pain, sore, sore, ache, ache, tired, tired, giddy, giddy, according to their names. Do the noting part by part, neither slowly nor quickly. That sensation will pass away while noting or may become intense. If one does not keep up and continues to note diligently, most of the time it disappears. However, if the sensation becomes so extreme that one cannot note, do not pay attention to that sensation. Continue to note the rising and falling with extra attention. Note without any breaks. Odd experiences. For some people, when concentration and mindfulness become good, very unbearable sensations can arise. It seems like there is an airbag inside the chest. A big lump of air may seem to rise up to the chest. The pain may seem as if the flesh is pierced with the point of a knife. The whole body might appear as if it is burning. It may seem as if it is pierced by sewing needles, and one may experience prickling sensations. It may feel like insects are crawling up the body everywhere, and one may become agitated, strong itchiness, strong pain, and cold sensations may also arise. If one becomes afraid and stops observing and noting, those sensations tend to disappear immediately. If one notes again and the noting becomes good, it is likely that such sensations would arise again. Do not be afraid when these types of sensations arise. It is neither a disease nor extreme sensation. They are ordinary sensations that have been arising in the body in the past also. During the time when one did not practice, there were other distinct objects. Hence, these sensations were hidden. When mindfulness is good, those sensations become apparent according to their nature because of concentration. Note those sensations attentively to overcome them. There will not be any harm because of noting. If one stops noting in the future, when one's mindfulness and concentration become good to some extent, one will encounter such kinds of sensations repeatedly. If one does not give up and notes with diligence, one comes to know very soon that it has disappeared. The sensation appears as if it is thrown away. It is possible that the sensation will subside and will not arise anymore. If one wants to sway the body, one should note as wanting to sway. While swaying, note as swaying, swaying. For some people, the swaying arises automatically while practicing normally. Do not be afraid. Do not encourage the mind to sway, having confidence that it will disappear if noted. Note that swaying very attentively as swaying, swaying. Noting should be done normally, neither slowly nor fast, but by part. If the body sways too much, practice by leaning against a wall or other palm support, or by lying down. Very soon, the swaying will disappear completely. If the body starts to shake, note it in a similar manner. When mindfulness is very good, goosebumps can appear very rapidly, either in the back or throughout the body. Cold sensations also might arise intermittently. Do not be afraid. This is arising of joy according to the nature of practice. One may become suddenly scared when hearing some sound. Do not be afraid. When the concentration is good, one feels the torture of contact. Whenever there is wanting to adjust the hand, leg, or other parts of the body, note the wanting mind. Note the physical activities related to adjustment to using the levers that are commonly used. Do not adjust quickly, do it slowly. Walking meditation, it is enough if you note one part while walking fast or walking long distances. While walking, you must note the footstep. While taking the right step, note it as right step. While taking the left step, note it as left step. Beginning from the lifting of the leg until the placing of the foot, the movement should be known. Right step, left step, right step, left step, right step, left step. You should note once for each step in this way. This is how to note when walking quickly. When you walk fast or walk long distances, it is enough if you note once for each footstep, right step, left step. It is enough to note once. Begin walking meditation by noting two parts. When you walk slowly or when you do walking meditation, there are three parts in each footstep. Raising the leg is one part. Moving the leg forward is one part. Placing the leg down is one part. Among these three parts, you should begin by noting two parts, lifting and placing. Note the lifting of the leg as lifting. The lifting should be known thoroughly. After that, note the placing down of the foot as placing. The heaviness when placing down should be known thoroughly. You should begin by noting these two parts. Lifting, placing, one footstep is complete. While noting, placing on one side, the other foot can also start to lift up. Do not let this happen. While lifting the foot, you should note it attentively to catch it well from the beginning of the lifting. Lifting, placing, lifting, placing. In this way, for each footstep, two parts should be noted. While standing for some time, note as standing, standing. If there is wanting to turn, note as wanting to turn. While turning, note as turning, 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 turning. If there is wanting to go, note as wanting to go. When noting two parts becomes easy, note three parts. After about 2 days, the two-part noting may become easier. When it becomes easy, you should note three parts. Lifting, moving forward, placing. Lifting, moving forward, placing. Lifting, moving forward, placing. You should note three steps in this way. Right now, at the beginning, it is enough if you can note one or two parts. When walking quickly, note only one part. Right step, left step, note once for each step in this way when walking. When walking slowly, note two parts, lifting, placing. Restraining the faculties, the yogi should behave as if he were a weak invalid. People in a normal health get up easily and quickly or abruptly. Not so with people invalids who do so slowly and gently. The same is the case with people suffering from backache who rise gently, lest the back hurt and cause pain. So also with meditating yogis, they have to make their changes of posture gradually and gently. Only then will mindfulness, concentration, and insight be good. Begin therefore with gentle and gradual movements. While rising, the yogi must do so gently like an invalid. At the same time, noting it as rising, rising. Not only this, though the eye sees, the yogi must act as if he does not see. Similarly, when the ear hears, While meditating, the yogi's job is only to note what he or she sees and hears are not his or her concern. So, whatever strange or striking things he or she may see or hear, he or she must behave as if he or she does not see or hear them, merely noting carefully. Getting a drink. If there is wanting to drink water, note as wanting to drink. If there is intention to stand up, note as wanting to stand up. Note the activities of the hand, leg, and body while standing according to the levels given to them. Stand up, paying attention to the body, which becomes lighter and lighter. And note as getting up, getting up, getting up, getting up. Stand up slowly. While standing for some time, note as standing, standing. If one looks at something intentionally, note as looking, seeing. If there is wanting to go, note as wanting to go. While going, note either as moving forward for each footstep, or as right step, left step. There should be knowing from the moment the foot is lifted up to the moment of placing. When going slowly, for example, while doing walking meditation, for each footstep, keep noting two parts, either lifting moving forward, or lifting placing, or moving forward placing. When one is able to note the two parts well, note three parts for each footstep as lifting, moving forward, placing. If something such as water pot is seen, note as looking, seeing. If there is standing, note as standing. If the hand moves towards the water cup, note as moving, moving. If the water cup is touched, note as touching, touching. If the water cup is held, note as holding, holding. If the water is taken, note as taking, taking. While drawing back, note as drawing, 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 drawing. If the lip is touched, note as touching, touching. If cold is felt, note as cold, cold. While drinking, note as drinking, swallowing, drinking, swallowing. Note as cold, cold. When coldness is felt in the throat and stomach. When placing the cup back, note as placing, 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 placing. If the hand is put down, note as dropping, dropping, dropping. If the body is touched, note as touching, touching. If there is wanting to turn, note as wanting to turn. While turning, note as turning, 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 turning. If you go back, do so without stopping your noting. If there is wanting to stand, note as wanting to stand. While standing, note as standing, standing. If you stand for some time, note as rising, falling, standing. If there is intention to sit, note as wanting to sit. If there is going to the seat, note as usual. On arriving, note as arriving, arriving. If there is turning, note as turning, 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 turning. If the intention appears to sit down, note as wanting to sit. While sitting, pay careful attention to the body that becomes gradually heavier while going down. In note as sitting, 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 sitting. Sit down slowly. At the beginning of sitting, there will be adjusting of the hands and feet. Note them as they are normally called. If there is no significant object to note, continue as usual to note the rising and falling without any break. Going to bed. If there is wanting to lie down or wanting to sleep, note either as wanting to lie down or wanting to sleep. Note the adjustments of the hand and feet involved in lying down as lifting, bending, resting, and so on. As the body lowers down slowly, step by step, pay close attention to it and note as lowering down, or lying down, lying down. When there is touching on the bed or pillow, note as touching, touching. At the beginning of lying down, note the shifting or adjustments of the hands and legs and body as lifting, bending, resting, and so on. Adjust slowly. When there is no other significant object to note, continue to note the rising and falling as usual without any break. While noting in this way, if significant sensations such as stiffness, heat, pain, and itchiness arise, pay close attention to that sensation in practice as in the sitting posture. Also note wanting to swallow saliva or spit it out, wandering mind, thinking, reflection in the same way. When there is wanting to shift the body towards the left or the right, and when there is wanting to stretch or bend the arm and leg also, note the mind that arises during that time, and also the adjustments without any lapse. When there is no other significant object to note, continue to note the rising and falling as usual without any break. When there is wanting to sleep, note as wanting to sleep, wanting to sleep. If there is sleepiness, note as sleepy, sleepy. When meditation is mature, the sleepiness disappears. After noting in this way, and the mind becomes very clear at that time. Note as clear, clear. Then continue to note the rising and falling as usual without any break. Even though the desire to sleep may not go away, one should not stop noting in sleep. One should determine not to sleep and to do the noting continuously. One should keep noting the rising and falling and so on as usual. If the body is tired, one feels sleepy and falls asleep. Why noting in this way? Sleeping is the arising of life continuing consciousness, bhavanga, for an extended period. The life continuing consciousness is similar to the consciousness that arises at the beginning of life and the last death consciousness. Hence, it is very subtle. One cannot even know what object it takes. During waking hours also, it continues to arise. For example, between seeing and thinking, between hearing, thinking, and so on. Because it does not arise for a long time. Its arising cannot be known clearly. When one is asleep, it can be known because it arises for a long time. Even then, what object it takes and how it arises cannot be known. Thus, while sleeping, it is not necessary to note. It is not possible to note. Getting up, but when one wakes up at first, one should note the waking mind as waking, waking. At the beginning of the practice, it is difficult to begin by knowing and noting the waking mind. If one is unable to note the waking mind, after one remembers to note, one should note the objects according to their arising. If there is thinking, note as thinking, and continue to note the rising and falling. If one wakes up hearing something, one should note as hearing, and continue to note the rising and falling. If no other objects become especially obvious, note rising, falling as usual without any break. Note them according to their levels and adjust slowly. Thinking may arise, such as, what time is it? Note it as thinking. If there is wanting to rise up, note as wanting to rise up. Note the adjustments related to rising up also. There should not be any lapse. While rising up, pay careful attention to the body activities involved in the rising up, in note carefully as rising, rising. If one sits down, note as sitting, sitting. After that, note as rising, falling, as usual, without a break. When washing the face, taking a bath, and so on, note accordingly their aura, the looking, seeing, extending the hand, holding, taking, pouring, coldness, rubbing, and so on, without any lapse. While wearing the clothes, preparing the bed, opening and closing the door, holding something, taking something, and so on. Note all these without any lapse. Eating a meal, while eating food, if there is seeing, note as looking, seeing, looking, seeing. While preparing the morsel, note the adjustments of the hand as preparing, 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 preparing. When the morsel is taken up, note as taking, 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 taking. If the head is bent, note as bending, 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 bending. If the mouth is touched, note as touching, touching, touching. If the mouth is opened, note as opening, opening, opening. If the food is put into the mouth, note as putting, 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 putting. If the mouth is closed again, note as closing, closing, closing. If the hand is put down, note as putting down, putting down, putting down, putting down. If the foot plate is touched, note as touching, touching. If the head is raised up again, note as raising, 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 raising. After that, once you eat, noting every time one chews as chewing, 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 chewing. If the taste is no, note as knowing, knowing, knowing. If swallowed, note as swallowing, 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 swallowing. Note the touching as the food passes through the throat and stomach as touching, touching. In this way, one should note thoroughly every time one makes a morsel, and each time one drinks soup. At the beginning of the practice, one may not be able to know or note things concurrently, and there will be many lapses. Do not be frustrated. If one determines to note continuously and practices seriously by paying close attention, gradually one will be able to note and know more. When wisdom is mature, one is able to know and note easily much more than what is mentioned here. Increasing the number of objects after a day, a night, and so on, it seems that with each in-breath and out-breath, the noting of two accepts as rising, falling becomes easier, in that there is a space between rising and falling. At that time, at sitting posture, in note the three accepts, namely rising, falling, sitting. Similarly to the knowing of rising and falling, while noting sitting, one should know the body as it is sitting. While lying down also, note the three accepts as rising, falling, lying down. If it seems that there is a gap between the noting of the three accepts, then at a distant touching point at some place, note four accepts as rising, falling, sitting, touching. If this order of noting is not helpful at the sitting twice, note as rising, sitting, falling, sitting. While lying down also, note four accepts as rising, falling, lying, touching, or rising, lying, falling, lying. General objects. While noting the internal behaviors such as rising, falling, and so on ardently, it is not essential to note ordinary seeing and hearing. By noting the rising and falling and so on attentively, the noting and knowing of seeing and hearing are also fulfilled. There is mere seeing and mere hearing. However, if one intentionally looks at something, then one should note as looking, seeing, and continue to note the normally observed object. Although one may not look intentionally while seeing a distinct object such as a woman or man, one should note as seeing 2 or 3 times and continue to note the normally observed object. If one intentionally listens to something, one should note as listening, hearing, and continue to note the normally observed object. When one hears clearly the sounds of human conversation, sounds, loud noises, sounds of dogs, birds, chickens, and so on, one should note 2 or 3 times as hearing, and continue to note the normally observed object. If one does not note these types of distinct seeing and hearing, then one may not be able to observe clearly the normally observed rising and falling and so on. One might think and defilements may arise. If this happens, note it thinking and then continue to note. If one forgets and misses to note the bodily process in thinking, one should note as forgetting. and then continue to note what one is noting. If the rising and falling are not distinct because of sudden in-breath and out-breath, note the objects such as sitting, lying down, touching. While noting in this way, note the touching by switching between 4, 5, and 6 areas, mental states. After the passing of some time, and when one thinks that there is no progress, one may become lazy. Note it as lazy, lazy. As long as distinction in mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom is not achieved, one may think nothing is different. Because of this, doubt might arise, thinking, is this the right method? Can I attain the goal by following this method? Note it, doubting, doubting. One may expect the noting to be good and expect to attain something special. Note it as expecting, wanting, desiring. One may also think about one's previous practice. Note it as thinking. One may think whether the noted object is materiality or mentality. Note it as thinking. If the practice is not good, one may feel frustrated. Note it as frustration, frustration. If the practice is good, one may feel happy. Note it as happy, happy. After noting the mental behaviors in this way, whenever they arise, continue to note the normally observed objects such as rising and falling. As for the time of practice, one should practice continuously without a break, starting from the moment one wakes up until one falls asleep automatically. While noting day and night without stopping, even for the duration of an eye blink. At the beginning of the practice, one should do unbroken practice by considering, I will not sleep, and practice continuously. When wisdom matures, one will not fall asleep automatically, and we experience clarity and wakefulness. Summary of the method of noting. Note all the mental behaviors whenever there is thinking or wandering mind, whether it is good or bad. Note the physical behaviors whenever there is any adjustment or movement, whether it is small or big. Note all types of feelings whenever they arise, whether they are in the mind or the body, whether they are good and unbearable or bad and unbearable, whether good or bad. Note all the objects that appear in the mind. When there are no distinct objects such as these to note, continue to note the rising and falling, sitting, and so on as usual. While going also note the lifting, pushing forward and placing down continuously. If one does the practice continuously in this way, day and night, aside from sleeping time, one will be able to note all the material and mental phenomena rising and passing away at the present moment. Very soon, one will be able to witness the arising of the knowledge of arising and passing away in other insight knowledges step by step. Right understanding during meditation. When concentration is strong in every act of noting, seeing, you can distinguish between the visual object, the eye base, and the seeing consciousness. Out of these, the visual object and eye are matter which has no consciousness. Seeing consciousness and the noting are mind which have consciousness. So, in every act of noting, seeing, you discern that there is only matter and mind, and no ego or soul. This is the inside knowledge distinguishing between mind and matter, nama rupa paricheda jnana. In hearing also, you come to know that ear and sound are matter, hearing consciousness and noting are mind. There is only matter and mind. In smelling also, nose and odor are matter. In smelling consciousness and noting are mind. There is only matter and mind. In eating also, tongue and taste are matter. In tasting consciousness and noting are mind. There is only matter and mind. When you note walking, standing, sitting, touching, rising, falling, etc., you come to know that body and tangible object are matter, in touching consciousness and noting are mind. There is only matter and mind. When you note reflecting, thinking, etc., you come to know that seat of consciousness and mental objects are matter. Consciousness and noting are mind. There is only matter and mind. In this case, mental objects can be reflections, thoughts, concepts, forms, etc. But mental objects are considered as tangible matter. That is why objects of mind are mentioned as matter. The knowledge distinguishing between mind and matter occurs more in yogis of good intelligence and less in those of poor intelligence. Even though a yogi has few occurrences of this knowledge, he is said to have accomplished it. After this knowledge, with the improvement of concentration, the yogi comes to know to a certain extent cause and effect in the following manner. While noting walking, he discerns that because there arises the intention to walk, there is walking. In sitting and standing also, he discerns that because the intention to sit rises, there is sitting. Because the intention to stand rises, there is standing. While noting rising and falling, he discerns that because of the in-breath, in-out-breath, there is rising and falling. While noting seeing, he discerns that because there is visual object and seeing rises. Because there is eye, see rises. And hearing also, he likewise discerns it. Noting that he comes to realize to a certain extent that these acts are neither caused by ego nor self, but are just the result of corresponding causes mentioned above. This is the knowledge distinguishing between cause and effect. Then, while noting, walking, standing, sitting, rising, falling, seeing, hearing, stiff, pain, disappointment, happiness, etc. In every act of noting, he noticed that both the object of noting and noting mind arise anew and then pass away. At first, he noticed the beginning and ending of a step, and likewise in the rising movement of the abdomen. With the improvement of concentration and knowledge, he noticed them in segments. Thus, by direct knowledge, he comes to understand clearly that things are neither permanent nor pleasurable, but suffering. Life is just phenomena, and there is neither ego nor soul. This is maturity of true insight knowledges, namely anicca-nupassana, dukkha-nupassana, and anatta-nupassana. With the maturity of true insight knowledges, Nibbana is realized through Ariyam path in Phala Jnana path in fruition knowledge. Then one becomes at least a stream winner, Sotapanna, and forever escapes from the four lower worlds. He or she will be reborn in the good existences of human and celestial worlds. And within 7 existences, we realize Arahata path in fruition knowledge. So, it is highly essential to practice meditation to become at least a stream winner, Sotapanna. By thus practicing, may you all make progress in the development of concentration and realize in the near future through the path in fruition knowledge.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Tipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vidya Charana Sampanno Sugato Lokvidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati Satta Deva Manusana Buddhu Bhagavati Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditthiko Akaliko Ehi Passiko Upanaiko වේදිතබ්බෝ විඤ්ඤෝහිති සුපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ උජුපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ ඥායපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ සාමීචිපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ යදිදං චත්තාරි පුරිස යුගානි පුරිස පුංගලා ඒස භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ ආහුනේයෝ පාහුනේයෝ දක්ඛිනේ අංජලි කරණීයෝ අනුත්තරං පුඤ්ඤත් කෙත්තම් ලෝකස්සා